Oops, excuse me. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. Oops. Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Anissa Abdul-Rahim, and I am an assistant director in the Fund for Davidson. I'm joined by my colleague Judith Rouse, the Senior Associate Director in the Office of Alumni and Family Engagement. We are very thrilled to have the opportunity to welcome each of you for this special edition reunion back to school class featuring Mitzi Short, Tim Johnston, and David Taylor, and moderated by Lucy Marshall Davis, all members of the class of 1983. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few Zoom keeping items. First, I would ask for all participants to be muted, and we ask that you remain muted throughout the event. If you are comfortable and have not already changed your Zoom name to your first and last name, we ask that you do that now. You can rename yourself by clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen, hovering your mouse over your name, and then clicking the more button. Feel free to add your Davidson class year if you have one as well. The chat feature will be available. If you have questions for the panel during the Q&A period at the end of this presentation, please send them through the chat directly to me, Anissa, or Judith. We will organize the questions and ask them to the panelists. The panel will not be monitoring the chat, so please do not send questions directly to them. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible, Judith and I. For optimal viewing, we recommend hovering your mouse at the top right of the Black Zoom screen. You will see the view pop up. If you click on that and then select side by side speaker, you should see all the panelists pinned to your screen when we begin, as well as the slides. In addition, we have enabled live auto transcription for this call. If you would like to enable this on your end, you can hover over the live transcription button on your screen and subtitles should appear. Please note that the captions are not always accurate, so we do ask for grace and understanding, please. And if you have a tech issue, please send a chat again directly to me, Anissa Abdul-Rahim, or Judith Rouse. And now for our program. Our moderator tonight is Lucy Marshall Davis. Lucy Davis celebrates 20 years of running her own business, Market Next Communications, to help authors succeed. She's helped build books, author brands, indie publishing companies, and avid groups of fans for more than 33 authors and 41 new titles. It all began with a 14-year role as a novelist's assistant, marketing books that hit top of the New York Times bestseller list 34 times. Lucy has a rich knowledge of the publishing industry and significant experience connecting directly with readers, and she offers skill sets ranging from developmental editing to business planning and website design. Currently, she enjoys collaborating with authors who've written a first draft and need strategic guidance about how to edit their manuscripts and take their books to the market. Lucy majored in economics at Davidson and earned an MBA in marketing and human resource management at Vanderbilt. She has served on numerous reunion committees and is a past class fundraising chair. We will now turn the program over to Lucy, who will introduce tonight's program.
Thank you, Anissa, and welcome everyone. If you dreamed of seeing your name on the book cover and just to have no idea where to start, Mitzi, Tim, David, and I have all sorts of tips you may never have thought about. We'll share some writing process approaches to help you turn your idea into a marketable manuscript. And we're going to talk to you too about readers. How do you know if readers like what you write? Every author wonders that, and we're going to tell you how to pull a team together to check that out. And finally, we'll describe your publishing options. So let's get started. Could we get a slide going? Why do we call this class author business? Because so many of us think that writing is a solo act and getting our book published actually is just kind of like throwing darts. There's this impossible standard that I have to write a bestseller, and that's the only way I'm going to be a success. And that just sets the bar so high that no wonder people just sort of stop in their tracks. But if you plan your steps with the kind of research you'd use if you were starting a business, you take charge. For one thing, you define your version of success, not the New York Times' version. So it might be literary acclaim or to inspire a movement. You could write a book to attract new clients or just simply to delight your readers, to make them laugh and think and feel. Any of these results are possible. Your author business plan starts with a goal, studies how to connect with the right reader who will buy and ideally recommend your book, and then signs up a team, decides how to deliver the product, which is your book, and builds the brand. And the brand is not your book, it's you. You bring the voice, the creativity to the product. All of this is manageable. So how do you find your voice, tap into your creativity, and turn your ideas into a marketable book? Well, we have a panel here to help you. And first, we're going to turn to Mitzi Short. She has a really interesting approach. So Mitzi is a co-writer of You Should Smile More, How to Dismantle Gender Bias in the Workplace, authored with the Band of Sisters, a group of 6 executive-level women who met at PepsiCo and stayed in touch. After 25 years of PepsiCo in sales, operations, and marketing leadership roles, Mitzi is co-founder and CEO at New Season Coaching and Consulting Group. She and the Band of Sisters are speaking nationwide, using their book to raise awareness of gender bias in the workplace and to encourage cultures of inclusive leadership. Mitzi majored in economics at Davidson and earned an MBA from the University of Oregon. She is a Fund for Education Abroad board member and former member of Davidson's Board of Trustees, the Executive Leadership Council, and GolfTech's Franchise Advisory Board. In addition, she's a contributing editor to a book called Teeing Up for Success. So Mitzi, I'd like to turn it over to you. And I want you to tell us how you and the Band of Sisters work together to write a book with 6 people.
Thank you, Lucy. It's great to be with everyone. You know, as background, the Band of Sisters are change makers who have really seen it all. We like to say from the bottom rung to the boardroom. We are 6 PepsiCo alumni who worked at PepsiCo between the late 80s and 2016, overlapping for more of a decade. And then we've gone on to operate in more than 29 industries and all roles up to the C-suite at companies like Keurig, NFL, Equinox, ESPN, and BlackRock. And I say that as background because that was really the backdrop for us writing the book. The book came out in September. And it's really about workplace offensives that people didn't really know that mattered. You know, the small indignities, barriers, slights, some unconscious, that really hamper women in the workplace. So it's really a guide for men and women ready to take on the micro moments and help women advance in the workplace. We didn't start out to write a book. This all started as a Pepsi reunion dinner. And we were sitting around talking and reminiscing. And then we realized that, you know, all of us had experienced these little things or moments that made us so that we didn't really feel like we completely belonged or didn't fully belong. So we started talking about how we might use our collective voice, our experience, to make a difference. And our idea was to take these little moments, make them easy to recognize, easy to talk about, and use them as a way to call people in to really take action. So we thought we would go into corporations and speak at conferences as a way to really rekindle the conversation. And long story short, COVID happened. And so no one was able to go in to speak anywhere. And we thought, okay, well, let's wait this out. And then 2 weeks became 2 months, became 2 years. And so we decided that we needed to capture all our thoughts in a document. So we used Google Docs. And then we noticed, wow, we've got a lot of stories here, a lot of different perspectives. Maybe we should turn this into a book. And we began to figure out, okay, how do we flesh this out? So we listed all our scenarios in this Google Doc, and we each had to write our experience relative to those moments. And we met twice a week for 6 months, just writing in the documents, editing the documents. One of the 6 was, we call her Drill Sergeant C. She was adamant and on top of us, making sure that each person had entered into each of the sections each week. And then we sat around after we had all the information and wondered, wow, is this just us, just our people, women that were coming through during our time in corporate America? So we better check this out. So we actually did lots of primary research, interviewing hundreds of women that were earlier in their careers, really to confirm our stories, our situation, to make sure that we had the right target audience and that our message was still relevant. And that we found out that it was. And so that was really the genesis behind how the book gets started and how we work together to bring it about.
That sounds like a great team. And talk about starting a movement, because I know that's exactly what you're doing with this book. Well, let's meet Tim Johnston. Tim goes by TD Johnston in the book world, and he approached his book career in a different way. Tim won the 2017 International Book Award for the Best Short Fiction for Friday Afternoon and Other Stories. The title story of this collection was made into an acclaimed short film. Following his next collection of stories, Waiting for Eisenhower, Tim published his debut novel, Reciprocity, a crime thriller which has been optioned by Universal, with Eric LaSalle slated to produce and direct. His stories have appeared in numerous magazines and literary journals. As an editor and owner of a literary press, Tim selects and edits short stories for his acclaimed anthology series, Short Story America, which now features 7 volumes of contemporary short fiction representing the best work by today's authors. Tim majored in English at Davidson and earned an MA in creative writing at Antioch University, which happens to be Rod Serling's alma mater. He taught literature and creative writing at several top college preparatory schools and headed 2 schools before focusing on writing and editing full time. So Tim, can you tell us how your career went from teaching to full-time writing?
Yeah, I sure can. For a guy who, as an English major at Davidson, especially in classes taught by John Engel, a lot of short fiction classes, at the age of 21 or 22, I thought I was going to write short fiction and become a famous short story writer like F. Scott Fitzgerald. And 17 years later, and after having coached basketball, taught English, been an administrator in independent schools, I buckled down and said, you know what? You promised yourself at Davidson that you were going to write fiction. And here you are, having a great career, the time of your life. You teach in this form that you want to be an artist in. It's time to go ahead and do that. And so when I left heading schools, when my wife finished residency, I started a literary press called Short Story America for the purpose of publishing today's short story writers, obviously in an indie format, small market, no budget, but high quality short stories by today's writers. That's what worked me into the community of short story writers. And by then I had had several of my own stories published. So when I started the anthology series at Short Story America, and I learned that my work was as good as what I saw coming into our press, and with me as the editor, over time, as I published more of my work in magazines and journals, I decided, okay, this would have been in 2015. I'm going to pull a dozen of my stories that have been published out there individually into a book of short stories called Friday Afternoon and Other Stories, because I own a literary press. There are musicians who own a music label and put their own work out that way. And so for me, it was I don't want to say backdoor past self-publishing, but in a way it was, because I was lucky enough to be operating a literary press that had its own audience, its own readers and customers. And so my press has published my books, two short story collections, one that won the book award, and my press published my first novel. The book award got me an agent. The agent sent the first novel to Universal, and Universal loved it and optioned it. And so now I'm writing novels. I'm in the polishing stage on my second novel that is about to be shopped by my agent. That's how I came to be here.
I love that story, how, you first gave so many other writers a chance, and then it all turned into something wonderful for you.
Very lucky.
Well, that was hard work. Let's meet David now. We have David Taylor, and David has authored 6 books, including Court Wars, Intrigue and Industry in World War II from Johns Hopkins Press. It was a silver medal winner of the 2019 Independent Publisher Book Award in World History. Also, Ginseng, The Divine Root from Algonquin Books, and Soul of a People from Turner Publishing, which was an Amazon Pick of the Month and ranked among best books of the year by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He wrote and co-produced the companion Smithsonian Channel documentary film, also titled Soul of the People, about creative people finding their voices in the crisis of the Great Depression. The film received a Writers Guild of America Award nomination. David's articles regularly appear in Smithsonian, Mother Jones, The Washington Post, and other esteemed publications. As a storytelling consultant and a writer, David loves collaborating with people on crafting their story. He majored in English at Davidson, earned an MFA from the Rainier Writing Workshop, and teaches science writing at Johns Hopkins University. David, what role can stories play in writing a book, and how can authors find those stories?
Well, first, Lucy, thanks so much for organizing this evening. It's fun to be here with everyone and to hear Mitzi and Tim's stories is great. And thanks, Anissa and Judith, for all your work making this happen. Lucy, I'd like to answer your question with a little story itself. I mean, like Tim, I started with a love of short fiction and was encouraged by an award in the Vereen Bell competition at Davidson. So I went into Peace Corps thinking I'll write probably a novel out of that. And my shift into nonfiction after Peace Corps and work in international development was not what I had planned. But I found that my interest took me into different directions in nonfiction stories. And fiction gave me storytelling tools for making situations in nonfiction even more real for readers, right? With scenes, with characters, with tension, with dialogue, and being able to guide those by research in a nonfiction format. Other tools in nonfiction that can really help make the storytelling easier, and I think that's what a lot of people here may be interested in, than starting from scratch, is, of course, research. I mean, if you're writing your own story, maybe notes of a trip, or if you kept a journal, you might, or even a photo album or a folder of photos. They can help you, reconstruct a significant time that you've narrowed down for your story. Or maybe, you talking or exchanging letters, email with the person who was there, or an oral history that you might have done or come across. My first book takes readers from forests in the Appalachians to the upper Northwest, to China, and with a shared history by way of the ginseng plant. I followed the plant, but I was led by people's stories and was fascinated by how those stories intersected. So I think a book can actually come together by kind of gathering stories and figuring out a path through them. Short way to put it is that other people can be a great help in gathering your stories. I think Mitzi's kind of process for having a collective storytelling group and having a drill sergeant, it sounds fantastic. I first, at first going into nonfiction, I was leery of doing interviews. They seemed kind of daunting to go out to, people I didn't know, to ask them to do interviews, or I thought some of them would lead me down tangents that wouldn't be helpful for the articles that I was working on to start with, and that they'd be awkward. But I've really come to enjoy interviewing. I think it's just mainly having really good conversations, and you can structure them by the questions that you ask. And whether it's talking with someone who's directly affected by the topic that you're writing about, or someone with background related to it, it's just they really help you do a lot of the work of telling your story, and that kind of takes it off your shoulders to generate the narrative by yourself. Another person's perspective gives you an angle and details that you probably never imagine on your own. So one example, I guess, from my work is the book Corp Wars. I found like 3 families who were involved in this sort of corporate espionage facet of World War II, and interviewing the people from each of the families. And they knew what I was working on as far as a book goes. But they became, I think, when you show respect to people and show interest in their life and work, they really are very generous. And I think that that's where you get a sense of really life in the story beyond what you do if you're just kind of going just from documentary research. And it's the same with a podcast I'm working on now. It's actually circling back to the story of Soul of a People, and people during the Great Depression who took a job for relief just to get by, and found that they had a voice a story to tell. And some of them became famous writers after that. Ralph Ellison, Saul Bellow, Margaret Walker. There were a lot who maybe didn't know that they had that particular kind of approach in them. So this podcast goes back with interviews with writers, a musicologist, a native historian in Oneida, Wisconsin, people with connections to the main story who help to tell that larger story. And that podcast is called The People's Recorder. That will be coming out this summer. And I guess the other tool I just mentioned in terms of stories, to start very briefly, is to start with think about the most organic story structures that may relate to the story you want to tell. Of course, journeys or a chronological life sequence, these have a kind of a built-in beginning and ending. And so you can at least put the parts that you're interested along that path, and you may find a more more nuanced or varied way into this ultimately structuring the book. But it's nice to start with an organic structure like those to kind of help you keep track of the information that you're putting into it. And and for both fiction and nonfiction, some kind of research often helps the storytelling. Gives you details, even if it's researching your own life, finding details and things that maybe you forgot about. Maybe you see them in stories or artifacts or things, can really help you get to the people in the stories, the human element, and that leads to really the themes coming out and coming alive. I guess just to wrap up, I've come to really enjoy collaborations that get into storytelling and long form writing and film and teaching. Sometimes ghostwriting for organizations, working with them to weave personal stories into a larger story of a nonprofit or a business or a movement. And I got to give a TEDx talk about creative teamwork that gets at that. Sometimes people just need a writing coach to talk with every few weeks. And that's another way to kind of recap to somebody else the story that you're telling, and that kind of helps process it for yourself.
Thank you. That sounds like an amazing way to put together books. And the gathering is a wonderful process, but also science shows that readers remember better through stories. And speaking of readers, let's talk about them a little bit, because that's kind of the second part of our discussion, is how to write books that really resonate with readers, because the goal is to turn them into something that the readers are so excited about and connect with so greatly that they end up recommending them to other people. And this can start with the editing process. You know, every writer worries. It doesn't matter if they're famous, best-selling authors or brand new writers. Is anyone else going to really like what I've written? I like it, but will they? And it's too important to leave that to chance. So this is where hiring an editor can be a game changer. Now, if you think an editor is just a grammar cop, think again. So a good editor is trained to look at your book the way a reader would. They kind of put on that reader hat when they work with you. Developmental editors can look at the big picture early in your writing, things like structure, pacing, plot. A line editor makes notes and suggestions on things like clarity and writing style. It's the copy editor who fixes mechanics like grammar and accuracy. And proofreading, which some people think that proofreading is the same thing as editing. Well, that's just that final stage. It's a detailed look at the book after it's been formatted by the designer and before it goes to print to make sure everything's okay. So let me ask my author panel, what's it like for authors to work with an editor?
Well, oh, David, were you going to?
Oh, sure. I'll just first echoing that Lucy's point that it's you know, editors really are a crucial part of your process, and I find working with a good editor really makes my writing better. You know, it's they whether it's an article editor that I've come to respect, you know, and that's another point. I think that sometimes sounding out your story for a book, in doing part of that in an article and sending that out, submitting it to magazines or online to places to find out how editors respond. That's one way to sort of start to assess your you know, book's potential and who you might want to work with. And I've been part of a writing group for 8 years. Some of them do editing in some fashions, and just getting feedback that way is also another way of getting kind of respected editors, readers' responses to it. Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Oh, no. I felt you beat me to the punch. I wanted to give you the floor. Yeah, David's right. I am a professional editor, and yet right now, my second novel is, I have just gotten back notes from the developmental editor that my agent uses, who does a lot of the developmental editing for authors at the big 5 publishing houses. She's really good. And the worst thing that any of us can do, whether you're fiction writers like me or writers of nonfiction, is not listen when somebody else who knows what they're talking about has something to say. And that's vitally important. I am probably in the first week of 3 weeks of making adjustments to this draft of a pretty polished novel that's been through 9 or 10 of my beta readers, a number of my colleagues who write fiction, long and short. Still, this developmental editor found several things that weren't wrong, but if XYZ is done, if I would consider doing XYZ and all the work that goes into any changes in story arcs, character arcs, all of that are caused by changes, that it might go from an A- level novel to an A or A+ level novel. So I am a big believer in developmental editors. I do all my own line editing, but my agent exposing my books to developmental editors is something I am now going to get used to because I believe in it.
Excellent. Well, there are other people we can pull under our team too to help us gauge how our book's going to play with an audience, and also just to actually serve as recommenders of our book. And Mitzi, I know you've employed a couple of different techniques in terms of getting blurb writers and reviews and that kind of thing to get your book launched?
Yeah, I think I'll talk about the blurb writers, the focus in on that. And we kind of had a comprehensive approach that really said, let's think about, who we want and how we can really get the people that have reach and relatability and credibility for the audiences that we're trying to target, in particular our bullseye target, which is women early to mid-career, and then also allies trying to pull in men as well. And so we looked at different industries and thought we wanted to have representation across industries. We wanted to leverage our Pepsi alumni base, really those individuals that had an impact on us and in business, and then also in education. We also wanted to try to make sure we had some media coverage as well. So basically with 6 people, it's a little easier to create a list of proposed individuals to give blurbs and perspective, and also you have to give them a sample of your book to read as well. And so each of us proposed industries or disciplines that we wanted to have represented, and then we each identified individuals that we knew within those disciplines. And we had dialogue and debate as to who would be best. And then once we identified the people that we wanted to go after, we had to come up with a strategy. Who was the best person to ask for them to write a blurb on our behalf? And so we did that. The whole process took about a month to pull all that together. And we've been very happy with the people that, they believe in the cause and the book, and really were big advocates and supporters of ours throughout the process in our careers as well. So.
Excellent. And for those of you who are wondering, what is a blurb? So when you open a book, I don't know if this will show, but this is Mitzi's book. And when you open it up, I guess with my background, it's not going to show. And you have quotes from books. It's a rather inelegant term, but we do call them blurbs in the business. People, basically little testimonials about the book.
We even use it as a verb.
Yes, we blurb. We go blurbing. Exactly. So
Hey, Lucy,
yeah.
could I interrupt just for a second? I know we're not supposed to see a question and respond, but I wondered if it might be timely, since I referred to beta readers. I saw a question from Steve Stein asking for some elaboration on that. Is that okay if I do that?
You read my mind. I was going to ask you to talk about beta readers.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I think I have 9 as of now. I expanded it when I moved from exclusively short fiction to novels. They're 2 different animals that incorporate, some of the same features, but they are different animals. And some people are big consumers of novels and not of short stories, and some are vice versa. But I use a mix of people, all of whom are avid readers and excellent readers and insightful readers. I think the beta readers have got to be that. They don't all have to be fellow practitioners of the art, but some of them should be. And some of them are potential blurbists as well. So I believe I have 7 who are fellow writers of fiction, and I return the favor to them. And 2 are not writers of fiction. One I know is about to be. I don't know if he's here in the audience, but one of my newest beta reader is Joe Lehman from the class of '83. We reconnected because of my books. He had acquired them and read them, and his insights were absolutely tremendous. He is now someone that I not only will show my work to, but even run some things by. He's that good a reader and should be writing.
I guess that sounds great. I'll just piggyback on that, saying in nonfiction too, it's can be helpful to have. So I typically use my maybe a different group of readers for depending on the subject. I'll have like one, if there's a science involved, I'll have somebody who's more versed in the science of that book than I am. Maybe one who's really a good reader about the history of that period and can fill in, can call out gaps where I've missed on that. And then really a sort of a literary, either a fiction or nonfiction writer who read very closely and give those comments. And usually with some combination of a trio like that, I feel better about the work that comes out.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, great. Well, let's move on very quickly to the next slide and talk about the next step, which is actually getting the book published and produced. And I'm just going to give you some very quick lingo here, and really just to give you the words if you all want to Google any of these and find out more, but just quickly and perhaps oversimplified, Big Five and other traditional publishing houses buy publishing rights by paying advances. And then once the author turns over the final manuscript, they take the book to market. Now, in self-publishing, or also called indie publishing, the author makes all decisions, owns their own intellectual property, and creates a team to edit, produce, and market their book. Often in indie publishing, they use a print-on-demand model for actually creating the book. So every time you press a button to buy, literally, there's a connection to the printer in probably Delaware, and they print a copy and send it to you. Then there are small presses and hybrid publishers that fall somewhere between, and they vary how they work so much that I can't really necessarily characterize them. But I want to let David talk about getting books traditionally published, because you've done that so many times.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I started approaching agents and publishers like about 20 years ago, from going from writing articles to proposing the books. And so at that point, looking for agents was basically looking at books that you love, and then looking at the acknowledgements page and seeing if they thank their agent. And if so, chances are, by your interest in that book and ability to cite it and reaching out to the agent, that starts a connection that you can build on. That worked with me. I really loved the book Rivertown by Peter Hessler, and I approached his agent, and he then was able to work with finding a publisher, Algonquin Books. So I guess the main thing I might say about that traditional publishing route is that to get a sense of the landscape by both the books that you really enjoy and by resources like Publishers Marketplace, they have like a publisher's lunch of deals, kind of updates of who's buying the types of books. And the writer's market is a resource in most libraries that gives you a sense of, and online, and that gives you a sense of who's publishing what, either in articles, but also in books. And I guess just to say briefly that to aim your proposal at the appropriate kind of scale of a publishing target, if it's a big publisher, they'd be interested in national scale stories. So I felt like the ginseng book was a national story of history, but its focal point was in the South, where ginseng is still gathered a lot. And Algonquin Books, which had roots in the South, in North Carolina, was a natural fit. And then, say, for Cork Wars, which wove together those stories of three families involved in a company that was centered on Baltimore, looking at maybe a regional press was the right fit. And actually, so Johns Hopkins Press, that had interest in the region and also history, turned out to be the right fit. So kind of thinking that way helped to navigate that.
That's important, to do your research and meet the publishers where they are. That's how you really get in. So Mitzi, can you tell us how you ended up publishing your book?
Yeah, we ended up going a hybrid route, and we got a lot of information interviewing authors who had written books, and one in particular was more like a mentor to us. We hired a person to actually write a book proposal, and got a lot of information and insight from that person. We decided, I guess in December 20 and January 21, we really started shopping our book and got a lot of information in terms of clarity around, who we should choose, the research, the different types. A number of publishers wanted us to have a lot more marketing support behind it. And that was probably one of the key things that made us decide, hey, we're going to go hybrid. We're a group of marketers, so we don't necessarily need that a big publishing company would provide. And so we took the hybrid amount and we selected a publisher, and he was really great and attentive to our needs and really great with the editing and really figuring out, from a distribution perspective, what was best for us, a lot of guidance on quantities and things of that nature. The timeline was great. So we actually started, in February and March of 21. We started editing in April of 21. We handed over the book in July of 21. And then in August, September, we actually got the book back. We started to work on the title and the cover in the fall of 21. And within a year, September of 6, we launched. So lots of conversations, really figured out we didn't need to go the full publishing route. We needed flexibility and somebody that was more interested in kind of doing additional things for us. And in fact, he's come back to us, and we're actually going to produce the audible version as well. So really tailored it to our needs. Works best for us.
Oh, that's wonderful. So Tim, just quickly, can you touch on the small press world and anything else you want to talk about here?
Sure. Yeah. For our anthologies at Short Story America, we are the prototypical indie press, small, not much money for marketing. A ton of word of mouth is what brings us our readers. We have a lot of repeat readers. We have about 5,000 email addresses of people who've given them to us, who are our readers. So we use a service called Constant Contact to let people know when there's a new volume of short stories coming out, that kind of thing. This past November, volume 7 came out. And as I mentioned, my press has also published my books, my own individual books. And it's the same thing. I'm able to tap into a lot of the same audience. That has expanded recently with the novel Reciprocity. Word of mouth on that book was really good on social media. And then especially when it was optioned by Universal, people took interest in it who may never have decided to read it because a major studio had optioned it. It's been optioned as a multi-season television series. So the new book that I'm working on draft-wise is book 2 in the Reciprocity series. My agent didn't have to twist my arm much as to why I should do that. I am prepared for any other books to come out from my press, but my agent is now pitching reprint of Reciprocity and the second book in the Reciprocity series, along with my second novel, The Daffodil Society, that's I mentioned the developmental editor, largely to the Big Five, in an effort to take advantage of the situation with Universal for when, I should say, for if, because an option is one thing and going to principal photography is another. But so I may now be in the process of transitioning to traditional. That said, this way of doing things, having my own press, has really benefited everything having to do with my writing. What I use mainly for income from my books, way more than Amazon. I barely mention Amazon except if I want people to read the reviews and see the ratings and whatnot, because Amazon, that's basically rabbits pay per copy as far as them keeping them and the distributor keeping most of the money that comes in. So I use a sign and ship model, and that has worked extremely well for me for all 3 of my books so far. just the sign and ship model, come to my website, which is tdjohnston.com, and people can choose any of my 3 books to order a signed copy. There's a special instructions box when they place the order. They can say, can you say happy birthday, Paul? This is a gift for my husband. Just any way that people want an inscription personalized, I do it. I really enjoy doing that. And some people say, can you just sign it TD Johnston? When it's personalized, I write Tim. When it's not, it's just TD Johnston, because that's the name on the cover. And so it's all worked. It's all worked. And I highly recommend that anyone who's serious about getting a book out there sooner rather than later. It could take you years to find an agent. And how do you even know if it's a good agent? And certainly it could take forever to find a major publisher that pays a nice advance. And if you're coming into it late like I did, you should consider creating an LLC that is a press. It has an imprint name, and putting your own work out from that press, because there still is just enough. There's not as much stigma with the term self-publishing as there used to be, not even close. And I'm sure Lucy could tell you that. But there is still some. I mean, there's a reason why the industry likes to make reference to self-publishing. I think in some ways it's an effort to diminish the quality that people may be losing out on by not ordering a book because it's self-published. So it's something to consider, forming an LLC to put your work out. Nobody has to know that that's your LLC.
Exactly. And I think the key with self-publishing is that it's not, doesn't mean DIY. You still need to pull together a good team of people to create a quality product. And that excellent product is what really gives you all the sales momentum, because then you get readers talking about it. And that's increasingly what I've been doing these last 7 years, is what I guess I could call my services are assisted self-publishing. So walking people all through the process. I have 2 books coming out at the end of May. They are second books for 2 of my authors. And so particularly if you plan to write more than 1 book, it's an excellent way to go. And they're just, they have their own publishing company, and it works really well, and they can get those books out quickly too. So, well, I wanted to wrap up very briefly, and then let us get to the Q&A. But I want to thank all of you so much for coming and bringing your different perspectives and really unique approaches to creating books. And I think all of our visitors here today, you've seen you're in a lot of good company out there in the author world. There could be co-writers, coaches, editors, beta readers, and we learned about blurb writers. But the choices don't have to be overwhelming. If you stay laser focused on your business goal and use that to make your decisions among all the choices and how you bring your book to life, you can do this. So thank you very much. And I'm going to let Judith and Anissa run the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And to the rest of our panelists, you have done an absolutely amazing job. We are now going to move on to the Q&A portion. We've been looking and monitoring the chat. So I'm just going to ask our panelists the questions, and then we will get the answers. First question is, can you share recommendations on sourcing editorial services?
Well, I provide editorial services of all 4 levels. So certainly I'd be happy to talk with anyone about that. And another technique is similar to what I think it was David was saying. If you look in books that you like, often in the acknowledgement pages, they will acknowledge the editors. I know I'm happy to see my name's in a lot of books. So that's a really good way to find that out. And David, I believe in a couple of the books you mentioned that are good resources, they actually have editor sections. Is that correct? Like, is Publishers Marketplace, does that have editors?
I believe so. Yeah, they have both acquisitions editors at publishing houses and but in terms of like freelance editing services, Authors Guild actually is another place where you can find both like ghostwriting and editing services. And just to circle back, yeah, Lucy, your editing services so a number of years ago when my book Corp Wars was about to come out from Johns Hopkins, they had some resources, but they didn't have much marketing support. So getting in touch with Lucy, I worked with her on both marketing support of updating my website and things, but also editing and getting messaging ready for. So I heartily recommend Lucy as a starting point for, if you have questions both about approaching the book project or marketing or editing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, for about 5 years, I did it on an unadvertised basis, just because I'd worked with so many writers that some would approach me and ask, could I hire you to edit my short story collection? And then sometimes they would want me to go further than that, which was to take them through the entire process. The graphic designer, the layout, cover design, all the way through that graphic designer putting the final version up at Ingram's Lightning Source, which is that's the printer and distributor that I use. It's excellent, and all bookstores in the world can order from Ingram, which is Lightning Source. I heartily recommend to everyone in this audience, be in touch with someone like Lucy. More specifically, be in touch with Lucy. I don't do that anymore, and I now just write my fiction and do my work for Short Story America. So I no longer do that, or I would do a little plug for myself, but I'm going to plug for Lucy because I've just been wildly impressed just by what I've discovered she does and has done for 20 years. Probably 10 years ago, if I had known Lucy did this, I may not have taken the route that I took, which was I just gained experience and did it myself, but I would contact Lucy.
Okay. Come on, we're gonna party. We're gonna party, Lolly. Let's do big girl. Big girl party.
Okay, I couldn't see. Alrighty, thank you for answering. And by the way, that question was from Elizabeth Benton. Thank you, Elizabeth. We're gonna move on to the next question, which is please excuse me if I mispronounce your name at all. Cicely Craighill Davis wants to know, what is the best discipline you adhere to as an author and artist?
Could you repeat that quickly?
Yep. What is the best discipline you adhere to as an author and artist?
Well, I'll jump in. I have limited experience with just 2 books, but a thing that worked well for me was setting aside a specific time to write every day, and then also a specific place. And I tried to get a routine, which is usually starting with music to get in the mood, and then I would just go quiet and just write. And then when I got a block or the writing stopped, I would get up and listen to more music. But for me, it was a set time every day, a specific place, and then music to get the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, I'd echo that. For me, having the same place and time that I go to it in the morning, in my case, but and whatever, that helps create a rhythm, and my sort of body, myself knows that this is where I go. What happens when I'm in this place is I'll write. And I agree that starting with music can definitely get you into the space of the story. And I guess, of course, reading is a part of the discipline too.
Yeah, I agree with both Mitzi and David. Having one place for me where I write, I'm sitting at my writing desk right now. I write on a desktop. I own a laptop. I don't use it for writing fiction. I don't write a single word in a Starbucks or a coffee shop, but I know writers who do. And you really have to know yourself well. It's critical to know yourself well. I need solitude. I need music. I use AirPods. I do not listen to any of my other shuffles except my writing playlist when I'm writing fiction or when I'm editing my own work, same thing, because my writing playlist takes me into mood, and mood is really important in fiction. I don't write nonfiction books. I don't know how important that is in nonfiction. I don't. But I do know that for me, literally putting myself into this other world is critical. I mean, let's think about it. We're constructing human souls here when we write fiction. And so we can't be in our house or in our office. Find a way to transport yourself into whatever it is you're writing. For me, music is vital, and always being in the same place is vital. I've been driving kids around for a number of years, so I don't always get to do my writing at the same exact time every day. But usually the middle of the day, 9:30 or 10 to 2 works best for me.
Yeah, those answers were awesome. I really love that. And you all definitely spoke to routine. And I love that you all also all mentioned music. That's very important as well. I'm going to move on to the next question from Emily Malinito. The question is, writing is not my primary career. I'm wondering, what are publishing houses looking for when they think of marketability of a book with new authors that don't have an author-specific brand already? And let me know if I need to repeat that as well.
Lucy, you can probably speak to that as well as anybody.
Yeah, I mean, well, for any brand new writer, publishers are looking for platform. So even if it's not necessarily a writing platform, but if you have, good connections in social media, if you know a lot of people and can pull together a big mailing list that would be sort of automatic sales to begin with, that's really important for nonfiction, like critical. As far as fiction, it's the quality, it's that spark, it's that something special. And I think probably everyone would agree that very first paragraph of the very first page of your book is the most important writing you'll ever do in your life. So, just really putting your best effort into that.
In fiction, whether nuanced or overt, the early hook is vital, as Lucy just referred to with the first paragraph. The early hook is essential in the short story. You're dropping the reader into a situation involving the potential for tension and conflict. It's really the same with novels, except that in many novels, you're constructing a book that is going to move along chapter to chapter. And I would argue that every chapter had better end in a way that may cause a reader at 2 o'clock in the morning to keep going. You've got to write what entertains you. I can't stress that enough. I think we do our best writing when we are writing something that's really interesting to us as readers, as people. There's a quote I really liked from John Edgar Wideman, and I was not sure when I might drop it in here, if at all, but I think now is a good time. Good writing is always about things that are important to you, things that are scary to you, things that eat you up. Probably if it's not one of those three when it comes to fiction, then you need to get back to the drawing board. I'm a big believer in that one. And then another quick one for those of you who feel a little intimidated by the idea of starting to write a book. If Stephen King has always felt intimidated by that idea, then we have really good company. The scariest moment is always just before you start. That's Stephen King from his book called On Writing. And also you can, you should, and if you're brave enough to start, you will. So
On Writing is a really good book to check out too. It's great. I guess the only thing I'd add to that is, yeah, write the book that you would like to see, and also that the reader won't be surprised unless there's some also surprise for the writer. And so there is discovery in the writing itself often. And so don't feel like you have to know how the whole book unfolds when you start that first page. That you will surprise yourself in writing it. And that's one way that you will also be able to delight and surprise the reader.
I agree 100%. It's why I don't outline. I know there are writers who do, and that's like with music and other things, it's a matter of what works best for you. But one of the things that I do, as David just alluded to, you create situations, you're dropping readers into character situations. But once I do that, in a very significant way, I'm writing to find out what happens. I think suspense works better that way if the writer himself or herself is somewhat in that same state.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our next question is going to be from Whit Trumbull. The question is, what do you see as the pros and cons of different publishing routes in terms of income and control of your material? What factors do you weigh in considering how important rights or control are for your specific situation?
I have found that it's been very important to me to be able to control quality directly. As you have gathered from earlier, for example, I work very closely with a superb graphic designer whom I use on every project. And I like having control not only of what you can read in the book, but also what it looks like, what it feels like. And so I like control. I think I'm about to give up a lot of that if my agent succeeds with what may be opportunity because of Universal. I'm prepared for giving up control, which involves trust, but I have really benefited from being able to control quality. But again, part of doing that, I was lucky I had experience. Part of doing that would be working with somebody like Lucy.
Mitzi, could you speak to that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we looked at one, control, two, we were new to it. So we needed some guidance as well and some resources and some infrastructure. But we didn't want to give up a lot of control by going with the big publishing company. So the hybrid seemed to work best for us in terms of giving us the flexibility, but also some of the infrastructure and insight and information and support that we needed.
The speed to market definitely is a factor. It takes the longest to go through traditionally published and then, faster and faster all the way down to indie publishing. The difference though is the distribution. You've got obviously better distribution with traditional publishing, but also Mitzi, you found a hybrid publisher that has good distribution, right?
Yes, we got, the major, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, a number of other places, and then great on, bulk orders for corporations. And I think the other piece of that too is having the infrastructure like a website and social media to publicize and create pull. So when you have all that, and then the network, if you don't have a network to really create pull in terms of speaking engagements or things like that, then you might need more of a traditional publisher, someone to help with that.
And in indie publishing, you can distribute through those same channels. You don't have a sales force behind you the way you would with traditional publishers, where they're actually going out and contacting Barnes and Noble and pushing for shelf space and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's why a good indie publisher is their books are going to be available from Ingram, because then it is Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Amazon, every bookstore on the planet. They all can get it just by working through Ingram.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Going to move on to the next question from Steve Stein. The question is, what respective experience have you each had with digital and Audible formats versus traditional print?
I can speak briefly to Audible, but yeah, so I actually retained the rights for audiobooks and then went to ACX is sort of the publishing arm of Audible that will help actually match up authors with both audio production, audio producers and voice talent to create your book, and you can get quotes that way. So acx.com is one way. If you do retain, if you want to do the Audible book portion yourself, you can do it through them, and then decide what layer of distribution you want to have Audible involved or have it involved from Amazon. There are different distribution options then, but yeah, you can do that yourself, and I've found that's a good way to go.
I'd say we chose just to do the hardcover book initially, and have been approached in the last 4 weeks with an opportunity for Audible version. And we think it's a great opportunity in the sense that first you think, hey, just the traditional route of, book reading, but more and more people are using Audible, and it's not necessarily at the expense of hard copy. So something definitely worth exploring.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I'm going to ask 2 more questions. The next question is from Mark McGuire, excuse me. What advice do you have for cultivating a social media presence before and after publication?
Well, I actually started my author business in social media back in 2009 when Facebook was kind of new and no one knew how to wrangle that and growing communities. So it's obviously that landscape has changed greatly, but it is definitely important to, really think far ahead in terms of building a presence there, but being mindful that it's not an advertising platform. So building trust by talking about things that people really care about that aren't all about you, and finding common topics that that may relate to your books or to your characters, but you're just not obviously in their face. Doing things and doing things like what we're doing today too is offering webinars or trying to speak on podcasts. I know, David, you've got a lot of experience with podcasting, so making those kinds of appearances are important as well. Any other suggestions from you all?
Yeah, I mean, I started Short Story America in 2010, but in 2009 I joined Facebook and began to network primarily among writers and fellow writers. And so by the time I launched Short Story America, there were a couple thousand members of the Short Story America Facebook group, for example, and now they're somewhere around 4,000 members, which is it's a group, it's not a fan page, so people request to join. But what's nice, and especially in that way that you just mentioned, Lucy, That's the Short Story America Facebook group. Well, I control that. But most people who come and visit that group, like authors will come and post their new short story collection, or hey, go read my new story at One Story or whatever. That's a service. That is a service to people interested in short stories, both as writers and readers. So on those occasions, well, I will drop a post in there that's my own work and an opportunity to buy it. You know, I'm just another person doing that, but there are an awful lot of people there who know who I am because of the other stuff that I do, and it'll lead to sales. As long as the hard thing with social media is finding a way to self-promote, which you must do, and avoiding over self-promoting. You do not want to be obnoxious and like every day, go, please buy my book, please buy my book. You have to give people a reason to do that. Today, for example, on Facebook, I have, maybe 4,200 Facebook friends. And so, but I try to be judicious about it. Today, in Memories, it popped up. An event I did at the Pat Conroy Literary Center a year ago, popped up as a memory, their advertisement for it. I shared it, and just on Facebook, I shared it, how much I loved, returning to the town where I wrote Reciprocity, and this event last year was for Reciprocity, to talk, read, sign books. Well, that is a way to self-promote, because there's a validation to it. And I didn't even mention in that post, here's how you can order the book. Didn't even mention it. People can find it, and did, some people ordered copies, signed copies from my website. I didn't ask anybody to do that today, but they did. You can work social media without, over self-promoting. At the same time, you darn well better self-promote. And if somebody publishes your work, they're going to expect you to do that. Would you agree, David?
Yeah, and you can, by focusing on the subject and the story that you're putting out, that helps you get past the sort of any it helps me get past the self-consciousness of selling itself. It's like, I want this story to get out, and so I'll do what I can to make it engaging for the most readers and the most people who listen or people who find me on social media.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I'd say our approach was, we wanted to get our message out about what we were doing, which is really promoting more inclusive workplaces and spaces. So we actually hired a PR agent early on to build awareness around that, and then have subsequently hired somebody to focus on a social media campaign that's really about the work that we're doing, not necessarily selling the book.
Right.
And to your point, Dave, we've done a lot of podcasts, a lot of conversations with different groups, educational facilities, organizations. So really about getting the word out, and hopefully the message will inspire people to buy the book, but more importantly, take action to help create more inclusive workspaces for women.
Yeah, Mitzi, you've forgotten more than I'm ever going to know about marketing and promotion. I had to kind of feel my way along, starting in 2009. But you and your friends probably moved straight into the right ways to do it, especially when your book is also a service to other people.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all so much. We are past the 9:15 mark, so I am going to stop it here. I want to thank Lucy, Tim, David, and Mitzi for their time. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight as well. For the questions that weren't able to get answered, we're going to make sure that we send those to the panelists and work on contact information for them to answer those questions for you. Again, you also see the contact information of our panelists there on the screen. And then again, I can't say thank you enough. And I hopefully to see the class of 83 and others at our reunion in June. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.